This is WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. You are listening to One Human Nation with your host, Sandy Batiste. This program will be talking about race and race relations in your community and nationally. Our goal is to be open, honest, and productive.
Welcome to the One Human Nation Show. I'm your host, Sandy Batiste, and thanks for joining us for show 18. Before we get started with today's show, I do want to remind everyone that the viewpoints expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So as we get started in today's show, I think it's a good time to remind you that some of the concepts and what we're going to talk about, it does create tension. And I've posted on the One Human Nation website some of these concepts to help us put into context what we're going to be talking about. And that's especially true of today's show because we're going to have a guest that'll be calling in about 10 minutes or so. And it's really going to get into this deep culture, the subculture, what's beneath the iceberg when we think about learning about other cultures. And in talking to different people, one of the terms that I heard that I really like and will start using more of is the concept of multicultural and getting adjusted to how we have to or should be able to adjust to other cultures and what does that require from us, because it does create tension. It does require us to be curious. It does require us to be open. And what we like to do on this show is to have safe, honest, open, and productive dialogue about race and how we've created or how it's been created with racism in this country and getting adjusted to the system of privilege and advantage that's in place for a particular culture, whether you think of that culture as being a white culture or not. And so as we adjust to today's show or start thinking about today's show, I do want to direct your attention to what is posted on the website at onehumanation.info. And when you take a look at that cultural iceberg, and now to get to that, you just click on the page that says anti-racism. So I'm just going to throw it out there. In order for us to move forward in being one human nation, we really have to start talking about what is really holding us back. What is preventing us from communicating and engaging and making productive changes in our country? And I don't focus a lot on what happened this week or things that were said because, fortunately, there are other shows that focus on it. Unfortunately, there's always something in the news to talk about. So the question becomes, how can we adjust? What tools and what skills do we need so that we can continue on our journey of learning about our internal biases that we have? How can we protect ourselves? How can we be safe? How can we engage in this conversation? Some communities have different conversations going on around this topic. Some of them entitle them Courageous Conversations. I know there was one group and they had theirs entitled Undoing Racism. And it's a matter of what's happening in your community. And I'm still getting adjusted to the community in Savannah, because Savannah is a little bit different in how the whole process of cultures coming together happened. And one of the common denominators in Savannah, whether you were white or a person of color, was in how the interaction engaged around a big tourist attraction now in the city, referred to as City Market. Well, this is where emancipated slaves went to sell their goods, whether it was things that they had grown or seafood or any other items that they were taking to market. And this is where they engaged with white people who were very comfortable in going to the market, because that's where they had to go to buy food and to buy goods. So Savannah has a long history, and I think that's why there's such a sense of, you know, there's a comfort level with the different cultures coming together, at least on the surface. And one of the guests spoke about, if doing a gauge and having a barometer to measure ethnocentric to ethno-relative, that as far as the cultures getting together, that Savannah would be ranked very close to a 5 for ethno-relative. However, when you talk about economic equity, he pointed out that it was closer to a 1. And I'm still working through that, because I'm just still in my happy place that it's so it's so nice on the surface to have that comfort zone, to feel comfortable engaging with people from other cultures without it feeling like there's an attack or constantly being in a defensive mode. So as we get ready to think about our show today, keep in mind that some of the things that you may hear will possibly create tension for you. And remember, one of our communication agreements from the One Human Race series is the divine is found in the tension. The question becomes, how do we start managing that tension so it doesn't shut us down? Because in order to go through this process of reconciliation, we do have to face some truth that, whether it's internally about ourselves, that can be painful, but it can also be truth about learning about the history of our country, the truth of facing what we have dealt with in our families. We have to deal with that truth in order for us to go through reconciliation, to go through a healing process, so that we can eventually, hopefully one day, have justice. And I think that's the process for us to become one human nation, and recognizing that it may sound very simple, but it is it can be a very painful process, because it starts with us looking within ourselves. So that's why I've encouraged you to take a look at doing the implicit association test that is posted at the onehumannation.info website. There's another activity that's posted there by Peggy McIntosh, and it's called Unpacking the Knapsack. And if you go to the Undoing Racism page on the onehumannation.info website and go to, just scroll down and you would get to that link. It's very insightful, especially when you consider that was something that she wrote, I think it's now going on about 20 years ago, but it's still very relevant. And it's what we all have to do to get through this process of undoing racism. So I ask you to get your thoughts together. For those of you that are driving, please be safe out there. And for those of you that are listening in and you're at a place that you can actually take notes, I hope you do take note, whether it's actually writing something down. And it's always a good idea to journal, to really take a look at how are things impacting you based on what you see in the news, hear on the news, see posted in social media now, which is kind of a whole nother world, to take a look at how people are engaging. I've had people tell me that they've actually unfriended people because they just didn't like what they had to say. And that's unfortunate because, it does require us having some difficult conversations as we all go through this journey of reconciliation and healing. So as we focus on and looking at some of the things that impact our deep culture, we're going to get further into the perspective of the guest that's going to be calling in to see what adjustments she had to make, and was she aware that there was going to be differences in culture. I mean, so it's interesting to see how the transformation happens in order for relations between cultures to be successful. And the other part of that is, I don't think those adjustments ever change. I don't think it ever gets to the point that someone says, okay, we're done now. We've already done all of the work that needs to be done, and we're never going to have this issue again. I think it's that constant awareness of how we need to constantly be focused on what is it going on within me that I need to take a look at? What do I need to be aware of? So as we prepare for the guests to call in, I do recommend that you take a look at the book, and the library is a great place if you want to take advantage of those resources. The book that I'm really enjoying reading right now is Why Are the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And the other that I'll start talking about more is one that's entitled Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. So it's very interesting now to start looking at the science of what trauma does generation to generation. And so what we're going to do as we get ready for the caller to call in, I am going to go to break, and we'll be back with One Human Nation in a few minutes. Kerri, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining the One Human Nation show and taking time out of your schedule there in the ATX. So, I like to get started just so that the listeners have a context of, kind of where you grew up and what stories, if any, did you hear about other cultures and any specific cultures and how that kind of directed your path during your growing up years.
Absolutely. So thank you for inviting me on the show to share my experience. I appreciate that. So the listeners just have an idea of who I am. I'm a curly, redheaded, Irish, English person with a little bit of Native American blood. So that's me. And I grew up, I was born in Texas. I was born in Dallas. And I didn't spend very long here, maybe just till I was about 2. And then my mom moved with my stepdad up to New England, and that's where I met my father, my actual stepfather that we're with today. So this is dad number 3. So we moved around a lot, but I lived mostly in New England, I would say Connecticut, Massachusetts for most of my life, and 1 year in Virginia. And so I've kind of lived all over. My mom grew up in Midwest Texas, in a little town called Kermit. So a lot of my upbringing around the idea of race had to do with my mom's early experiences, actually.
Okay.
So she actually told me, she raised me telling me that, everybody is equal. Everybody look at the book, not the book cover. Look beneath the surface. We're all equal. We're all the same. Everybody's got to put their pants on one leg at a time.
Right.
And, she when she referred to people, she didn't refer to their color of their skin. So she wanted to ask me about a little girl I was playing with. She'd ask me, well, what about that little girl with the blue dress? How did you enjoy playing with her? Things like that. So she very deliberately did her best to take that out of the conversation. And the reason for that was because when she was growing up in Midwest Texas, in this little tiny town, and they went to the Southern Baptist Church there. My grandmother was very active in the church. And my mom would be in the Sunday school, and they'd be singing the song, like, all the little children, yellow, brown, purple, white, whatever.
Right.
All the colors of the rainbow,
exactly.
Are all loved by God, And then there'd be 2 bathrooms, one for colored and one for white. And my mom wanted to go in the colored bathroom because she likes the rainbow. She's like,
she likes the colors,
why
right?
Why can't I go in there? So she couldn't go in the colored, and then she'd ask questions about that, and they'd tell her to be quiet. So she started, realizing that there was something wrong. There was an incongruence with what she was being told and what was actually happening.
Right.
And the more she tried to ask questions about it, the angrier people got,
Right.
Because it's exposing it.
Well, and I think it's when you start trying to explain it, it doesn't really kind of make sense, especially when you're trying to explain it to how a child would understand it, because they're pretty transparent. They ask very specific questions. So I think that's great that your mom picked up on that and that she conveyed that to you. And so as you continued on your journey in this life, then how did that play out in your world?
Well, it's interesting. Every place I lived had different perceptions, and I guess I was not used to, it wasn't part of the frame of my being. Like, it wasn't a framework for me to look at someone's skin color necessarily. Like, I noticed that people were different, of course.
Right.
I was noticing that, but
right.
It wasn't the primary thing that I was thinking about. And but there were definitely experiences where I noticed that people were different and that they were getting treated differently. And there was one time when I was in Virginia Beach, and you know how kids pick on each other,
Right.
you know. And there was a little girl who was African American, and some of us were picking on her, you know, and I joined in.
Right.
You know, second grade. And I joined in with it, and, you know, we were calling her like the creature from the Black Lagoon, you know, and I got such a sick feeling in my stomach. You know, there was something that it just made me feel like I've never forgotten it.
Right.
And it's always sat like deep in my heart. This like really sick feeling inside of me. So that was sort of my one experience of like really being, you know, what I would consider, you know, racist, you know,
Right.
really doing that.
Right.
And it felt horrible. I was like, I don't want to do that. That's yucky. You know, no more of that. So, so my parents, yeah, they really reinforced this idea. But the interesting thing, and I know you and I've talked about this, the interesting thing was, of course, then I'm like, oh, okay, everyone's equal, right? Like everybody's equal and they're all the same. And so that means I can like anybody. And so as I got into junior high, started dating. And by now we're in Connecticut. In Connecticut, I lived in Enfield. And Enfield was, at the time, a blue-collar town. We had some pockets, you know, sort of, just to give you an idea of the demographics. We had some pockets of blue-collar. We had pockets of white-collar, and it wasn't really mixing completely. But, you know, people were doing their best to get along. But there was definitely a rough-and-tumble quality to the town a little.
Right.
So, and my dad was, you know, worked at Digital, you know, which is a computer company. So we were definitely on the white-collar, you know, end of things. And there was a lot of diversity, and not a lot. There was some diversity in the town. So, you know, there were some African-American kids in the neighborhood and at the school and on the bus. And in high school, one of the kind of more prominent African-American boys who was very attractive and was a football player and quarterback and the whole thing, he wanted to date me. And he brought, you know, he had a friend come over and ask me if I'd date him. This is like the end of junior high. And I hadn't had anybody ask me to date me. It was my first one. And I looked over him and I thought, well, he's really cute. Okay, I say yes. And we started dating. And there was so much drama in my town from the two of us dating each other, because this was back in 1984, 1983, 84 in Connecticut. Not a normal thing people have been seeing, you know?
Right.
Not something people were used to. And they, you know, they had already kind of been giving him a lot of hassle, you know, over his skin color, which I wasn't aware of at all. You know, I was completely oblivious to it until I started dating him. But I was aware after I started dating him of what the names they were calling me now, you know?
Right.
Like, wait a second.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of discomfort over it, and it had long-reaching effects for me. And the interesting thing was, when I started doing that, my mom was just like, no, you can't do that. You can't date him. And I looked at her and I was like, you know, at the time I think I was a teenager. So I was like, you're such a hypocrite. You know, you're such a hypocrite. You're telling me I can't date this boy because he's black, and you're just a hypocrite, and you're racist, and you told me all these things, and it's just a lie because you don't really believe it. And I really attacked her.
Well, and as teenagers do, we don't need too much justification anyway to be in that role of, you know.
Through that.
So if you felt really justified as a teenager, I can only imagine the drama in your household.
Oh my God, there was so much drama in my household. You know, years later, I understand now. My mom was, she'd experienced serious racism, you know, in Midwest Texas when she was growing up. You know, she had experienced serious racism, and she was concerned that I was going to be the target of some of this stuff that had been happening as she was a young person, you know,
Right.
a young adult. So I understand in retrospect why she was concerned. But I didn't understand at the time, and I just thought she was just being racist. I was so angry.
Okay. So give us an idea, and you can think about this also. Give us some ideas of things that you learned under the, subculture wise, things that I know we've talked about this because, one of the things, and I think the listeners can tell from listening to you, is that you're very open person, and when you walk into a room, people are kind of going to know that Kerri's there, right? So
I can't help it.
so what were some of the things that you had to really learn about the African American culture, especially as it related to Black males, since you were dating Black males? So what were some of the, some of your I guess, for want of a better word, revelations that you really didn't think about, that you had to start making adjustments to or learning about?
Well, so there was a lot of lessons. One of the lessons was to actually witness the kind of way that, my boyfriend at the time was being picked on, and he was defending himself, and then he was the one getting in trouble for defending himself. So I saw that, and I didn't like that. It didn't sit very well with me at all, and I'm kind of a renegade, so I got a big mouth, and I would speak up about it. And I just thought that was wrong, and then there's also just more subtle things, like at the time, this was the time of, like, Michael Jackson. Right. And the whole Thriller video and all that. Okay, so this is such an awkward story, but I'm just going to share it. So we were dating at least a year by the time that came out, and they had the roller rinks, with the Michael Jackson, and it just came out, and it was up on the big screen, at the roller rink, and I was trying to be cool, and I was with him, and I did the moonwalk.
Okay.
So mortified. He was just like, stop. Just please stop. Don't try to be cool like me.
Yeah.
And, so I had this thing where it's like in my heart, I felt this total allegiance with him because I felt like I'd been picked on so much by, I hadn't been allowed to express myself or, for my own reasons, having nothing to do with my skin color, but just, in my journey. And I really liked that he stuck up for himself. I wanted to be like that. And that's why I dated him, really. Right. I wanted to be cool, and I wanted to stick up for myself the way he was.
Right.
And so I was wanting to blend in with this culture that, I was not part of.
Yeah, which would be hard for you to blend into.
I can't blend in anywhere. If you guys could see me, I have like big mop of red curly hair, and not going to blend in anywhere. So it's been a real journey to, and even like speaking of that subject, as I ended up marrying a Caucasian man for my husband and had kids with him, and it was nothing to do with that. It was just that, there was this lightning across the room thing that drew me into the karma. But after that relationship ended, 20 years later, I started dating African American men again because I never lost my interest or my fascination, and it was interesting. I had to start realizing like I would date some guys and it seemed like they were constantly on edge, like they were like shaking their leg and looking around the room constantly, like scanning the room all the time. And it was like, why are you so nervous? Like I didn't understand that.
Right. And
somebody finally clued me in. They're like, Kerri, like you're a beautiful woman. You really stand out. Like you're not timid. And then they're with you and you're in Texas at a public place and it's obvious you're dating.
Right. And they're doing everything to try to be invisible, not to draw attention to themselves, I'm sure, in that way. And
exactly.
Yeah. So I do want to get into how, you kind of made the transition, and I kind of think of you as a healer in what you do and how to get people to move past, those things that are part of our history and part of, our internal clock that sometimes we're not even aware that it's ticking, and it's a ticking time bomb. So if you can hold on, I'm going to make a couple of announcements, and I'll...
This portion of WRUU-LP Savannah Soundings programming is made possible by a grant from Sentient Bean, offering fair trade coffee, vegan and vegetarian food, and breakfast all day. Located at 13 East Park Avenue, across the street from the tennis courts at Forsyth Park. Our menu and special events listings can be found at sentientbean.com.
As a business, if you enjoy our programming on WRUULP, please support the station with a donation. Let your customers, neighbors, and friends know that you share our vision of building a thriving community based on diverse, vibrant radio programming. As a business partner, our listeners will know you support Savannah's only broad-based community radio station. Become a tower sponsor or underwriter. To check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Again, to check out the levels of corporate sponsorship and to donate, go to www.wruu.org/corporate. Thank you for listening to and supporting WRUU-LP. So, Kerri, you still with us?
Yes.
Okay. So, I met you in Austin, and at first it was with a networking group connected with the business I was doing at the time. And so that's where we initially met. And then I had asked you to provide some support for us for the One Human Race volunteers at, we were just doing a little retreat, a little appreciation for the volunteers. I can't remember. I think that was 2015. And one of the things that you shared at that retreat that kind of stays with me is how you described how people hold on to their truth. And I want you to explain it in the Kerri way. About how that works and how we can, for me, it helps me really manage when I come across someone that really thinks differently than I do, and it's their truth. How does someone manage that, especially with all the, what people hear now and what they're engaged in? How would you describe that, and how, I'll just let you explain it because you do it so much better than I do.
Sure. Thank you. So the way I've been taught through the Toltec Wisdom and the Four Agreements, such a great book if you haven't read, by Don Miguel Ruiz, a really great book, and he explains why we don't take things personally. But the way I like to boil it down is that, each one of us is walking around in a big bubble of like all of our belief systems, all the things that we believe to be true. And because we've got all that stuff in our bubble, that's how we see life. Like, because we have those perceptions and those beliefs, that's the experiences that we end up having. Like, we end up, if we have a belief that there's no good men in the world, then we keep dating men and finding out that there's no good men in the world. Like, it keeps happening, over and over and over again. People are like, why do I keep meeting these bad men? Well, it's inside. So it's in your bubble. So, when we want to see another person, we've got to realize that there's a lot of stuff in the bubble that's keeping us from seeing each other clearly. And there's a lot of perceptions. And where do we get those? From mom, from dad, from uncles, from aunts, from playmates, from school teachers, from commercials on TV, from experiences that we had that started to justify and build up the belief systems of our families. So, there's like this internal Jenga structure that's built up of all of these stories and beliefs, which may or may not be true.
Right.
So if you can even just remove one piece out of that Jenga structure, just one belief that you can question in yourself, that you're like, this is absolutely true. I know it's true. Beyond a doubt, it's true. It's definitely true that a redhead cannot moonwalk. Just take that for just a second, because maybe it's true. Maybe if you could just change that one belief that it's okay that this redhead moonwalks, like she might actually do a good job at it, maybe.
Right.
That if you change one belief, I'm just making a joke, but, there's lots of beliefs in there that are really serious beliefs that are passed down through painful experience.
Right.
And if we can just question those and just see it through new eyes, just one of those, the whole Jenga structure can start to loosen and maybe even fall down to the point where you actually can just connect with another human being from your heart, and none of that other stuff matters.
Right. And I love the way you describe that, because one of the things we do, that I talk about is on the show especially is how to, maintain our curiosity around other cultures and about other cultures. And that requires us in many cases to step outside of our bubble, to really, if we have negative perceptions about a different culture, how can we engage in that culture when it creates so much tension in us, I guess, is the other thing that I, struggle with a lot of times when I'm going to experience something new and different. There is a fear factor. I mean, there is that, it's like, oh, do I really want to go and do that? Or, how different is it going to be? And I think the classic institution that I see that around are churches and different denominations, and how there seems to be this, dividing line on, would a Catholic go to a Baptist church, or, I'm just using that as an example. But, do you have some suggestions as far as what we can do to help us move beyond the tension? Because we tell people the divine is found in the tension. So how can we move beyond the tension that, creates that resistance to even learning more about a different culture?
Well, I think you're doing it right now. I mean, you're exploring people's experiences, and that, if anyone who's tuning into this is already expanding your awareness that there's other possibilities than the ones that you knew were possible. I think that one of the things that has served me well in my life has been because I had this early teaching, that everyone is the same, underneath is where it's at. It's not what you see on the outside. So I became friends with all groups in high school. I was one of those annoying people that was friends with like every group. And people were like, well, you can't be friends with them because you're friends with us. And I'm like, no, I like you all. Like, I'm not going to pick.
Right.
I like all of you. And I think if you can do that, what happens is that you open to all these different perceptions, and you start to realize that people believe different things. There's not one reality. There's like 7 billion realities happening all at once. And if we want to connect, we've got to stop using the labels, because the labels create separation. And I just did a live video on my feed on Facebook earlier today, this afternoon, about the label and in different contexts. But labels are creating separation. And what they do is they sort of say, well, you're different than me because you're this and I'm that. And then what it does is it says, well, because you're different from me, I can treat you poorly because it doesn't matter that I hurt you because you're not one of my people. I'm not with you. And that's exactly what's happening in the world today. We're experiencing war and separation, and that kind of separation leads to treating the earth badly, which we're doing. We're treating the earth really badly because we're disconnected. We're saying, well, I'm human. I don't care about the earth, or, I'm not connected to it. Yes, you are.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the whole label thing, and I think that's what's, the whole creation of, well, it for creating racism in this country, it even went beyond labeling. It was, totally intentional about creating this division based on the color of someone's skin, and we continue to do that. We continue to perpetuate that. And so it's interesting as we start moving, I think, through a reconciliation process in this country. How do we start dismantling those labels is going to be, I think, of prime importance, because until we do, I don't see how we can get through a reconciliation and healing process.
Well, I can tell you that, with personal development work, until the student is ready, they'll reject the teacher. Like, they're not going to listen to the message until they're ready, until it gets, and usually people need to suffer to be ready to change. Unfortunately.
No.
I know. But it's like, I just see it all the time, like people are like, well, I should work on myself, but there's this great movie this weekend, so it's like, and there's also just not awareness. Like, there's a lack of awareness. So what you're doing is great. I'll just share that, I haven't, my skin is, white, right? So I haven't really experienced, I know in my mind that there's this deep racism in the South, and I know in my mind that it's not safe because I've seen examples of it not being safe for someone who's African American to go in certain areas. I know that it's not, but I hadn't experienced it. And actually, my sweetie and I think I told you this story. We actually took a trip to Arkansas to go dig up crystals because we're into all that kind of stuff. And he's African American, and he's awesome, my husband. So we went to dig up crystals, and we got a little turned around, and he was driving, and he got a little turned around, and we ended up on this back country road that was one lane through people's acreage properties with fences. And
Kerri,
I felt scared.
Were you the navigator? I mean, how did this happen?
No, I was like, you're not going the right way. This is wrong. Turn around. And he's like, well, it's one way, so we'll just keep going. I'm like, I disagree. I'm like, I'm texting your mother right now. I mean, she's going to hurt you when she finds out this. She's terrifying all of us. I was like, this is, I mean, I'm a little psychic, and, I'm, that's what I do for my job. So I'm like psychic and kind of empathic, so I can feel energies. And I felt scared. I mean, I felt the kind of vibe that was in that area, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that's not the place for an interracial couple to be driving through alone.
Right. Well, did he ever pick up on this? I mean, at what point?
Oh, he did. He did. But he's this martial artist, and he's like, trains himself to be very disciplined with his reactions, and not accepting the possibility of this negative outcome. And so that's kind of, he was like, we're going to be fine. I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, please keep driving. I don't know what else to do.
Right.
So it was really my first time experiencing that kind of fear, and I thought, wow, this really is real. I mean, this is real.
Right. Yes. So, Kerri, before I forget about it, because I do want you to share with someone that wants to connect with you, because I know you do some things online. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
Absolutely. So my website is the best way. I do free consultations. It's www.Kerri, that's Kerri, Hummingbird.com. So really easy, KerriHummingbird.com. Okay. And there's information up there about how to connect with me. And I do healing work with clients, and I do it over the phone. And one of the things I'm really interested in doing is healing some of these ancestral wounds, that are affecting us in our society, like healing that and getting down to the core of it so that we don't have to show up in that way in the world.
And that's very interesting. I mentioned before you called in that one of the books that I'm reading now, that it really kind of gets into the whole science of DNA based on generation upon generation, the impact of slavery. And the science also is there to show that it did also impacted Holocaust survivors. And so there is this whole science now around this subject, and the person that wrote this book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, basically is saying that, when you've been exposed generation after generation after generation to this constant stress, because now the science is there that our bodies release cortisol, that it does have a negative impact, and they can actually see it in how it changes, for want of a better way to describe it, because I'm not a scientist, how it changes our gene pool.
Well, when we change the DNA, we change our life experience, and we can change the DNA, through quantum healing. So healing of the energy in quantum space actually heals the past, heals the ancestors, heals the DNA, and that changes your whole life experience. And it's not just about your health. It's also like, what do you want to manifest in your life? Like, what kind of thing are you calling to yourself that you want to achieve that you feel blocked? And I'm okay to share this story because I have permission. My friend Marcus Harper, I worked with him for a couple of years because he had a dream of being the editor of the fashion column at the LA Times. And he moved to LA, but things were just blocked. It wasn't happening. And I went out there and did this healing with him on the beach. And there was an ancestor. It was all about a slave ancestor. And once we healed that, like within 6 months, he had that job. So,
well, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, like it's all about the DNA. It's about healing these things that are holding you back that aren't even yours. They were just passed down to you. Right.
Yeah, that's it. To me, sometimes it's difficult for me, and I know the listeners, it may be difficult for them to get their heads around it, but
totally,
I guess,
I get it.
Yeah, and I know you would get it, but the older I get, I realize that you do get these moments of, where did that come from? What is causing that anxiety? And you don't remember it being anything directly that you remember growing up, but it's so real that there's got to be, as far as I'm concerned, there's got to be something to it. So I can't believe how quickly time has gone, Kerri. So
I know, right?
Yeah, I can't believe how quickly time has gone. So I will invite you to come back on the show at some point in the future as you continue on this journey and what you discover and what you can share with us about that. But any closing thoughts you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I'd love to invite people to check out the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz and just start doing the inquiry to see what domestications got passed to you. What things were you taught that are holding you back, and see if some of that came from, this ancestry that you can then make a new choice. And I think as we all make new choices in that space, mm-hmm. we're going to come closer to being one human tribe.
Oh, I like that. What can I say?
I started a group called One Human Tribe. So if you want to start joining it and participating and sharing, that'd be great too.
Okay. Yes, I will definitely check you out on Facebook too, because I've seen that there. I think that's awesome. So Kerri, once again, thank you for joining the One Human Nation show. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before you leave us today?
Well, just connect with each other from the heart, and you can cut through a lot of that stuff in the middle. Just like you and I connected from the heart and got to know each other and had a conversation, you'd be surprised what evolved.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Kerri, and I look forward to following your journey with the One Human Tribe.
And good luck.
Thank you so much. I will talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Well, you're listening to WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. The viewpoints expressed in the preceding program were not necessarily those of WRUU, its license holder, or its staff. So as we get ready to wrap up the show for today, I know for some of you it might have felt like a little bit far out there to get your head around. I totally get it. But there's something for everybody, and that's why I wanted Kerri to come on the show, because I do think we get so attached to what we can hold on to that we feel is tangible and concrete, and there's more than one way to approach a problem. I think there are multiple solutions out there, and it's about being open to what's going to work the best for you. And wherever you are on your journey, whether it's working through a race reconciliation issue, wherever you are on your journey of faith, wherever you are on your path with your career, or whatever it is that you're doing, I do want you to know you're welcome to share those experiences on the One Human Nation show. And the way you would connect with me is you can send your story or an email message to me at mystory@onehumannation.info. You can also connect with the Facebook page, One Human Nation, and that's one spelled out ONE, because I had someone ask me, is it spelled out or is it a number? And it is spelled out, One Human Nation. I just don't think my mom would tolerate the number thing. She was pretty particular about that. So it is spelled out, One Human Nation, and the website is onehumannation.info. So I encourage you, whether you're in Savannah, wherever you are listening, is to be curious about your community. Be curious about the past history. And don't discount that there's more going on that you cannot see, that it is actually having an impact on maybe what we see developing in our country now, because all of us would have liked to have believed and stayed in our bubble, to believe that, with slavery being ended and the civil rights movement, that we were much further along than what it appears to be based on things that we see demonstrated in current events. So keep moving forward, keep assessing, keep being curious, and try to get out of your bubble in what's your truth, as long as you can do it in a safe way. So as we conclude today's show and prepare for the next show coming up, which would be Troy Stoner with Sound Limit, I do encourage you again to take a look at the website, onehumannation.info. Go through the information that's there, and we'll